Salt. This simple crystalline mineral has existed on Earth for billions of years, predating life itself. Occurring naturally in our oceans and underground deposits, salt has played a pivotal role in human civilization. In this documentary, we'll be exploring the history of this life-giving mineral. We'll also be traveling through Africa, Asia, Europe, and America to see how salt is mined and the many different types found in different regions throughout the world. This is the truest example of man's inseparable relationship with nature. It's the story of salt and earth, of salt and life. In the Italian seaside town of Cervia, an annual horse race is underway. Instead of returning home straight after work as usual, Letizia Magnini is heading to the racecourse.
Non devo uscire, devo andare a fare la diretta TV. Di a Giuseppe che ho dei problemi col parcheggio, non mi fanno andare e questo è un problema.
All'ippodromo del Savio di Cesena, in questa bellissima serata un po' calda, che sono molto importanti. Allora, Letizia, questo libro, il primo.
Il presidente della Salina di Cervia mi ha chiesto di lavorare sulla storia, sull'identità, sui valori della Salina di Cervia, non solo dal punto di vista della comunicazione, ma anche per raccontare a tutti questa grande storia, questa grande avventura. E l'abbiamo fatto facendo una grande ricerca storica, anche perché mi sono resa conto, facendo ricerca, che mancava in Italia un libro sulla storia del sale.
Letizia Magnini looks back on her research fondly, often referring to it as a sweet experience. In fact, she even went as far as to give her book the title, As Sweet as Salt. Cervia's salt has its own distinct flavor and is perfect for seasoning meat, the most common being prosciutto ham. It's also used to flavor fish in several mouth-watering sauces.
Ma molto molto dolce. Prego, arrivederci. arrivederci.
Grazie.
Grazie Fabio, sempre a disposizione. Ciao,
Vediamo,
grazie, arrivederci.
Cervia has always had a close connection with salt. Factories like this one were where the majority of salt production took place. Compared to other sea salt, this kind is milder in nature, with a soft but sweet aftertaste. Letizia even mentions it in her book, As Sweet as Salt. Besides being a scholar and author, Letizia also works as a publicity officer at the Cervia Salt Factory. Much of what she has learned there can be found in the pages of her book. Just outside the gates of the famous Colosseum, tourists have gathered to take photos with men dressed as ancient Romans. It's a small but poignant reminder of a once glorious empire. In ancient times, Emperor Caesar Augustus erected a monument near the center of Rome, which was known as the Golden Milestone. It served as the main conduit from the capital to other major cities along the Adriatic Sea, and therefore was instrumental in the development of their salt trade. Salt was one of Rome's most precious commodities at the time, and just as it was in other areas of the world, considered almost equal with currency. In fact, part of a soldier's pay would often be doled out in salt. Back then, a Roman's wealth or standing in society wasn't necessarily calculated based on how much gold they had, but how much salt they owned. Even the English word salary comes from the Latin word for salt.
La storia del sale è molto interessante perché racconta la storia di tutti noi, la storia umana, ed è una storia che ha a che fare con il potere. Naturalmente tutta la storia del sale è legata alla storia, nel senso che il sale era un bene talmente prezioso che veniva chiamato l'oro bianco, the gold white.
During the Roman Empire's expansion from the years 264 to 146 BC, Rome waged 3 great wars with Carthage over the hegemony of the Mediterranean Sea, catapulting them into economic despair.
L'impero romano ha basato la sua potenza su alcuni fattori, fra cui anche l'aver detenuto il monopolio della produzione e del commercio del sale. È molto importante questo aspetto perché appunto l'impero romano ha capito che il commercio del sale e la sua produzione potevano essere fondamentali per la propria economia.
In order to offset the cost of their military, the government began to manipulate the prices and taxes on salt. This ultimately enabled their empire to span across the continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa.
Il monopolio della produzione del sale in Italia e in tutto il territorio del suo impero, quindi anche per esempio in Nord Africa, ma è stato molto importante per l'impero romano anche detenere il monopolio delle vie del commercio. Le vie del commercio che sono state sia strade.
The ancient Romans built their salt factories on the shores, swamps, and saltwater springs of the Italian peninsula. By 102 BC, Rome had transitioned from a republic to an empire. Historians usually agree that it was their lucrative salt trade that made such a sweeping transformation possible. Of course, in terms of modern-day salt production, much has changed. During the intermission of the horse race, an overhead screen repeatedly plays advertisements for Cervia's salt. There was even a prize basket of sea salt, labeled as the Pope's salt, that awaits the winner. The more traditional style of horse racing is similar to the old Roman chariot races, except that the jockey is in the sitting position. The team will be disqualified if all 4 of the horse's hooves leave the ground at once. Riding high after her lucrative book launch, Letizia decides to put her money on horse number 2.
No, number 2 is where?
For the first lap, her horse is ahead of the pack, but quickly gets overtaken by the rest of the field. Letizia is still in good spirits, however, because she has the honor of awarding the winner on behalf of the race's sponsor, the Cervia Salt Factory. No matter the outcome, Letizia still considers the race a thrilling experience. The sound of galloping hooves and the cheering crowd remind her of a part in her book where she describes the ancient Romans at battle. From the very beginning, salt has in some way contributed to the rise and fall of civilizations. But when did the monopoly of salt begin to take hold in the Far East? According to archaeologists, China's Shandong province is considered the birthplace of sea salt. In this part of China, many local cuisines rely on pickled foods. Xi Wencheng is from Shouguang. Like most Shandong people, his favorite food is green onion and soy paste wrapped in flour tortilla. For Xi, no meal is complete without it. Xi Wencheng is the workshop manager at a soy paste factory and is very devoted to his work. Every morning at 6 o'clock, he listens to the weather report on his radio. If there is rain in the forecast, every single one of these barrels will have to be covered. Here, all kinds of vegetables are salted. Over time, they will turn into sauces and assorted pickled foods. Not only is salt vital for the body, it's also one of the 5 basic taste sensations. The saltiness comes from the reaction between the sodium in the salt and the amino acids released by foods. Xi Wencheng has been using the same tried and true recipe for years. It just takes a little patience. Just a few days later, another batch of pickled vegetables is ready to be shipped. Soy paste is one of the cheapest byproducts of salt in northern China. Whether it's consumed to sustain life or improve it, it's an essential part of most people's diets. As early as the Shang Dynasty, salt was already becoming the lifeline of China. About a decade ago, in Xi Wencheng's hometown of Shouguang, some interestingly shaped pottery was discovered. At first glance, it looked like a basic pot, but it has a rounded base. It also looks like it could be a water bucket, but there are no rings for the ropes to go through. Inside, traces of white sediment are found. Since ancient times, Penglai Bay in Shandong has been an important hub for the production of sea salt. Could these strange relics have been used in salt production?
这个是松的，蟹松。
哟，很完整的东西啊。
这个高的话大体有多少？
就高有25公分左右吧。
25公分。
对，直径的话有20、21、20这样的，很完整，里面还有白垢啊。
像上中期的。
是应该上在的，对。就当时煮盐工具嘛，是吧？这样放在灶上，弄上卤水这样煮。
Numerous other salt production sites were also excavated. They also found salt stoves and salt wells. Each salt stove is about 40 meters squared and can store more than 200 of the odd-shaped vessels.
像双王城这样规模大的盐遗址群呢，同时共存呢有100个盐灶，也就是说每一次煮盐呢能生产5万斤，肯定是有一个国家有个政府来控制。
This can be said with a fair degree of certainty. Among the items recovered from the dig were several wooden logs used to prop up the huts that housed the stoves. Since the wood wasn't native to the coast, it stands to reason that they were transported there, which would have required approval from the government. They're estimated to be around 2,000 years old. Summer is the best season for salt production, for rain is scarce and seawater quickly evaporates in the blazing sun. During these peak months, an imperial edict issued by the capital halted all salt production unless specifically sanctioned by the government. It also stated that all salt was to be bought and sold by the state. Otherwise, it would be considered contraband. Over time, the state gradually began to expand production by uniting salt workers from the coastal cities and villages. This large-scale salt production site clearly shows that over 2,000 years ago, salt was a scarce resource and was controlled by the invisible hand of the state. Krakow, the former capital of Poland, used to be the political and economic center of Poland. Here, there is a salt mine that has become a popular tourist attraction.
The people are at the moment actually doing some exercises, so you will see.
After a 20-minute descent down a series of steep stairs and narrow passages, tourists find themselves inside a massive underground church. It's an exceptional feat of early engineering, measuring 10 meters high, 54 meters long, and 18 meters wide in some parts. Walking through its dimly lit halls is an absolutely breathtaking 'experience. 。 experience. 。 。。 。。。 . 。。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。
有很完整的东西啊。
Here, everything has been carved from salt. From the tiled floors, the crystal-like chandeliers, a mural of Da Vinci's Last Supper, the statue of Virgin Mary, to other works of art from the Bible. Even more amazing is that these carvings were not etched into the church's walls after completion. They were sculpted piece by piece as it was being built. By the time it opened in 1890, it had taken just 3 miners 67 years to complete. Inside the Wilicka salt mine, there were 40 other churches like this. In total, the mine is 300 kilometers long, 327 meters deep. It has 9 floors and 2,400 rooms. Aside from its many churches, there were also canteens, postal offices, theaters, and nursing homes built inside. In the beginning of the 19th century, Polish salt industry scholars discovered that the miners who had been working in the caves showed signs of recovering from respiratory problems, such as asthma or lung disease. This promoted the construction of the world's first underground lung disease treatment center. Even today, salt cave therapy is still prescribed regularly. But the mines are not just a tourist attraction. In fact, around 15,000 tons of salt is extracted from here every year. This is Barbara. Right now, she's buying fresh food in preparation for a traditional Polish meal she is hosting tonight.
Się denerwuję, czy dostanę to, co jest. Przepysznie. Czekaj. Dobry?
The dish she is preparing is a mixture of mincemeat, cabbage, and sausage. As you might expect, salt is the most crucial ingredient. However, since it's a traditional dish, it must be made with the utmost of care. It's called bigos, which in Polish means mixed together. There is a saying among Polish people that with every 2 Polish people comes 3 kinds of bigos. Although it's a bit of an exaggeration, it means that almost every Polish person has their own unique way of preparing it. Since this is her own recipe, the amount of salt she uses will depend on the ingredients she chooses to include in her dish.
Sól powoduje właśnie wytwarzanie się kwasu i konserwację i w ten sposób kapusta uzyskuje specyficzny, kwaśny smak.
After mixing, it's stored in the fridge, thawed and refrozen 3 times over. And of course, she uses the best salt she can get her hands on, Wilicka salt. It's said that in the 14th century, the salt produced here had a purity of over 95%, and that many European nobles even ate it by itself. During the era when salt was as expensive as gold, it was mostly distributed among the Polish monarchy. This is Poland's greatest and most famous monarch. It's said when he came to power, all of Poland was made of wood. And when he left, it was made of salt. Since at that time, about 30% of Poland's national income came from salt, mines that produced it were often compared to gold-laying hens. The rise of the Polish kingdom relied greatly on the mines of Wieliczka.
Chyba wszystkie.
Dosolony, dopieprzony.
Pieprzu by chyba jeszcze przyjął, ale wydaje mi się...
Więc zobaczcie, jak...
Barbara's daughter still has fond memories of every time she came back from university to enjoy the bigos her mother cooked.
Tak, rozbijają się...
As for her mother's guests, it's a completely new experience.
Tak, i oni... Tak.
Raz, dwa i trzy.
Wytrzymałam to wszystko dzisiaj.
When the meal is finished, the guests will write down their thoughts and thanks in a book for safekeeping. Hundreds of years later, Polish people are still making this traditional dish from the salt of the Wieliczka mine. For the Polish, preparing and eating bigos is a way to pay tribute to their history and the miners who toiled in the dark and humid caves to provide food for their countrymen. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and a man named Tu Lu Hong is prying off a rock from the mountainside, not far from his home. This rock is not for himself, but for his sheep. By licking the rock, they will be able to extract its salty nutrients. This helps the sheep increase its appetite and resist the cold of winter. This is the Wenzhou Salt Mountain in southern Xinjiang, China. The Wenzhou Salt Mountain is the only one of its kind in China. These spiky, rust-brown formations are called salt karst and are shaped as rain gradually dissolves the bedrock. In the caves below, meter-long stalactites hang from the ceiling, dripping with salt water. When the pools evaporate, an abundance of flour-like salt crystals are left behind. Formed under the ocean hundreds of millions of years ago, this salt mountain contains at least 30 billion tons of salt. Even at the most conservative of estimates, there is enough salt here to support the world's current population for the next 1,000 years. These carefully controlled explosions release hundreds of tons of salt rock from the mountain. The rocks will then be sent to a salt factory for crushing and processed into refined salt for food and other industrial uses. In Xinjiang, the salt is so pure that when baking naan, a local flatbread, a pinch of salt is all that's needed to provide the perfect amount of seasoning. While salt is almost taken for granted nowadays, in olden times it was much more precious. In the Han Dynasty, the exploitation, production, and pricing of salt was strictly controlled by the Chinese government. The first wave of prosperity in the Han Dynasty occurred under the rule of Emperor Wu. During his reign, he repelled the northern tribes of Xiongnu and brought peace and stability to the empire by building a strong economy based on salt production. The traditional Chinese character and components for the word salt could be broken down to depict a minister monitoring a civilian who is stirring a boiling pot of salt water over the fire. During the reign of Emperor Wu, the state enforced a strict monopoly over salt, causing the price of salt to more than triple. Under these conditions, the empire was as wealthy as it had ever been. In 119 BC, Emperor Wu launched a decisive battle against Xiongnu, completely annihilating their armies. Whether it was defeating the Xiongnu in the north, Da Yuan in the west, Bai Yue in the south, or Korea in the east, none would have been successful if not for the country's monopoly on salt. But over time, the emperor's strategy also began to inflict extreme hardship on the people. It was only until later in his regime that he realized the repercussions of his actions. While the empire seemed to be greater than ever, his people were suffering. Overworked and underfed, poverty eventually led to social unrest and even riots. Yet there were other rulers and ministers of the empire who had different opinions on the matter of salt. One was Minister Song Hongyang, a man who had been an advocate of monopoly control for years. The other was Hua Guang, who was in direct opposition to it. Before he died in 87 BC, Emperor Wu made arrangements for the new ruling elite. He appointed Song Hongyang as imperial secretary and Hua Guang as general and commander-in-chief, asking them to provide guidance for the young Emperor Zhao, who was only 8 at the time. In February 81 BC, Hua Guang called on more than 60 scholars from all over the country to debate with Song Hongyang about the late Emperor Wu's policies. Hua Guang's side criticized the salt monopoly as being against the will and wishes of the people, while Song Hongyang argued that its practice had been used all throughout Chinese history. In his opinion, without a state monopoly, how could they sustain state power and support the empire? The fiery debate raged for 5 months, each man maintaining that they were right and the other was wrong. 30 years later, the debate was documented into a book called Discourses on Salt and Iron. The book describes that even though the salt monopoly policy Song Hongyang was proposing had successfully financed Emperor Wu's empire, it had made him unpopular with the masses. This made Song Hongyang a hated man, and many said that if he was boiled, it would immediately rain. In the end, Hoa Guang did just that, boiling his adversary to death, and thus ending the debate once and for all. In the Western world, many people consider French steak to be one of the best kinds of steak in the world. However, the secret is not in how the cow was raised, fed, or how its meat is cooked. It's the salt, a special kind native to France. It comes from the Gironde salt marshes near the Atlantic Ocean. And it's not cheap. Just 1 kilogram of Gironde salt cost about 300 yuan, almost 20 times the price of ordinary salt. Gironde is a small town located in the Brittany Peninsula of northwestern France. Here, the warm currents of the Mediterranean flow year-round, and the region's climate and sufficient sunshine create the perfect conditions for high-quality salt. It's only harvested from June to October, when the wind and sunshine determine the crystallization speed and taste of the salt. Marie Hameau and her family have lived in this town for generations. Today, she's headed out into the marshes to harvest salt. According to Marie, 11 in the morning is the best time to harvest, when the temperature of the salt water can reach 37 degrees Celsius. Under the hot sun, the salt water evaporates quickly, leaving behind beautiful translucent crystals on the surface of the pond. Its shape is where the name Gironde flower salt comes from. Unfortunately, it's especially fragile and easily affected by dew, so it must be harvested as quickly as possible.
C'est un sel qui va aussi aller avec les légumes, pour tout ce qui est légumes à la croque au sel, les petites tomates à la croque au sel ou autre. Donc un sel très friable, récolté en petite quantité quand même, parce que on va peut-être récolter 2 kilos sur une unité, ce qu'on appelle l'œillet, par jour. Donc comme on dit souvent, la fleur de sel c'est capricieux.
Marie uses a salt rake made with beechwood to carefully collect the salt and loads it into her cart. The water naturally drains from the salt, so no refining or washing is needed before it's put into bags and sold in the market. In the past, harvesting salt was the only source of income for the women of Gironde. They often used the money to purchase dowries, which is why Gironde salt is also known as salt of the bride.
Alors les salines, ce sont de la propriété privée telle qu'on la connaît en France, hein, comme toutes les terres. Moi je suis propriétaire de la majorité de mes salines.
As of today, Marie manages 48 salt ponds, and the marshes cover an area of around 4 hectares. Historically, from Louis XIV to Louis XVI, these salt marshes all belong to the French royal family. man playing the cello is Gregory, a history teacher in Arc-et-Senon, region of France. He is well versed in the French monarchy of the 17th century, and he too believes it thrived almost solely on the production of salt.
Alors, pour le sel, dans le royaume de France jusqu'à la Révolution, quasiment depuis Louis VI, on a une organisation d'État qui gère la production et la vente des sels.
During that era, the entire salt industry belonged to the French royal family, and they controlled everything from the prices to the taxes on salt. In time, they used their wealth to take over every large-scale operation in the country. But the more they acquired, the greedier they became, and the taxes continued to rise. This old map shows France divided into 6 sections, with each color representing the amount of salt tax that was levied on each region. Although the population of Paris only took up 1/3 of the whole country and accounted for only 1/4 of its salt trade, Paris paid 2/3 of the taxes for the entire country. As taxes continued to increase, so did the prices of meat, cheese, and other foods. Due to its reliance on salt and the fact that the city was too far from the marshes, salt prices were 20 to 25 times higher than those in Gironde.
Et à Paris, à l'époque, quand vous deviez rentrer dans la ville, vous aviez comme des douanes. Ce qui fait que pour rentrer dans la ville, il faut passer, comme ici, un poste de garde. Et ce poste de garde vous faisait payer si vous avez du sel en plus. C'est-à-dire que vous payez une taxe pour vous rentrer dans la ville, et si jamais vous avez un sac de sel sur vous, vous allez repayer pour pouvoir faire rentrer le sel dans la ville. Donc c'est pour les Parisiens, si vous voulez, en général, pour pouvoir faire passer le sel, on projetait le sel à la main pour qu'il passe au-dessus du mur et qu'un complice vienne le récupérer de l'autre côté pour pouvoir le vendre sans taxe.
High salt prices forced more and more people to risk engaging in illegal salt dealing. At the time, over 3,000 people were executed each year for smuggling salt, and in some cases, children were even imprisoned. Eventually, the government was met with a violent resistance, with 40,000 armed peasants storming through western France, chanting, "Long live the king without salt taxes." It proved to be the impetus that led to the French Revolution. The rebellion against the state culminated in the storming of the Bastille on July 14th, 1789, when revolutionaries took over the capital's political prison. It marked the beginning of a new era for France and its people. Louis XVI has always been described as an autocrat, a tyrant who neglected his people to live a life of extravagance. It was said that instead of concerning himself with the matters of the people, he spent most of his time designing locks and other mechanical devices. One example was his peculiar fascination with the guillotine, an ancient contraption used for beheading, which he redesigned to decapitate heads more efficiently. Ironically, in 1793, he died by the very same means. However, as he was being led to his execution, he appeared calm and at ease. Perhaps it was because he knew he was about to die. He could finally see the error of his ways. Whatever the case, his death propelled France into a new era, full of hope and prosperity. 230 years after the French Revolution, the Gironde salt marshes are no longer owned by the government. Since then, the quaint town has hosted an annual festival in honor of salt. Today, it's a fun tradition that attracts people of all ages.
En Bretagne, il faut tout garder. Donc les roi qui est tiré du tracteur ici.
Marie is the former chairman of the Salt Workers Union, and this is her first year of retirement. After many years of organizing harvesting festivals, today she finally gets to enjoy them as a regular attendee. However, her life's work will always be a part of her, and she will always feel a sense of service to her community and her people. Salt is the seasoning of life. It provides us with not only flavor, but an aftertaste of history itself. Salt has always been ubiquitous, but never before has it been as readily available as it is today. Whether it be for our economies or our general well-being, it has never been in short supply. It's like the unconditional love we share with those closest to us. It nurtures us, feeds us, and provides us with the building blocks for a sustainable future.